Hello, Steve White, Steve Arts 89. So I want to talk about reverse racism for a second because it does exist. Now, I understand systematic racism exists. I understand people of colour have to deal every day with things that affect their lives. I get how bad that is. I've seen it from the outside as a white person. I try to do things whenever I can without being accused of white saviour complex. You know, you try to call it out when you see it, particularly with your own people when they're doing it. But reverse racism does happen too. And what frustrates me is when people act like it doesn't happen or it doesn't exist or it doesn't matter because it's not as bad as, you know, the systematic racism of like white supremacy. I get that basically when it happens to me, it's a one-off incident. I can shake it off and go on. Whereas other people of colour, have to deal with it every day and it impacts their life and their overall like psychology and mental health and their finances and their lifestyle in general. I do get the difference, but it still doesn't make it right. Because in that moment when you're being discriminated against, you feel just as bad as the other person. But like I said, as a white person, you kind of get to shake it off and forget about it because it doesn't happen all the time. Like one of the first examples, whenever I used to only shop in the city, I lived a little bit out from the city and I only shopped in the city. I'd just catch a tram in, I'd never go to any local stores. And I always was treated really well. I could just walk into the biggest stores, assuming I dressed reasonably well, which I did back in the day. I changed my style a little bit a few years later, but I could walk into any store confidently. No one would bother me, no one would stop me, no one would check my bags. I could walk in and out. I always had a bag that I carry everywhere with my glasses and contacts and stuff, whatever in it. And then shopping bags as well. No one would ever question me, but I would notice that they would be watching the people in the store of colour, just like in the movies, and they would stop them, not me, but they'd stop them at the doors and go through their bags and really be checking like they're really sure something's in there that shouldn't be in there. Whereas me, I could just breeze on out, entitled as anything, oblivious to it at first, but then noticing it eventually. I could be on a train and not have a ticket because perhaps there were too many people at the ticket machine. I didn't want to miss the movie or whatever, so I'd just get on and hope a ticket inspector wouldn't get on. And the tickets, I'd just be sitting there deliberately looking out the window, confident as ever, like I belonged there. And the ticket inspector would walk past me, go straight to the person of colour on the train and question them and go through their bag and check their concession and everything, because they had to be in the wrong. Because, you know, and here I am sitting there, no ticket, no concession, looking out the window like I belong there. Not a care in the world. So I would see that happen all the time. But then I moved to Preston, and it's a very diverse area. And there's a lot of local businesses that are ethnic and ran by people who are people of colour. And I've started being treated like a white person in their environment. And I'm like, oh. And honestly, for the most part, because it happens to me so little, or because it's not something I feel like is really impacting my life, you can sort of look at it like an oddity, like, oh, I'm being followed around the store. That security guard who's not white is following around, and I'm like ducking and weaving, and he keeps following me, and I'm like sort of eventually I'm sort of like playing with him, and eventually when I try to leave, he goes through all my stuff and he's searching through like everything, like he believes it has to be something in there. I'm like, I'm being treated like a person of colour, and it's kind of like a trivial thing, like almost novel, because it doesn't happen very often, or it didn't used to. But I live here now; it does happen a lot. But it's still, though, when you do have the more serious sort of things, like I've had people of colour say, you are this because you're white, I'm treating you like this because you're white, because of this reason, because you must be like this because you're white. That's really offensive, and that is upsetting, and there's times where you kind of feel violated, but like I said, they're not really regular, and you get to sort of shake it off and go on as a white person, but it doesn't make it any less wrong. It's still wrong. People shouldn't be doing that. But they do. And the worst part is when you say something about it, you're basically belittled and said, well, you don't deal with this problem much, so it doesn't matter. I'm like, it still matters, just not as much as the other racism, the actual white supremacists who actually use the system against black people to keep them down, or people of colour, I'm not trying to belittle that by saying this is an issue too. But someone will say I am, I'm sure. But and I've had a few scary incidents where, and the worst one was probably I was walking home from a club, and I was about 3 blocks from the tram stop, and a group of kids, I won't say what race, just yelled out, and I can't say what they yelled out, but they yelled out white something. It was a swear word. And then they started following me, and they were yelling out abuse. I'm like, oh God, I'm going to get beaten up here. And I just walked really fast because I'm like, I had headphones, and I thought maybe if they think I didn't hear them, they will just give up because they don't have to prove anything. And I got to like the last block, and then they sort of stopped. And I don't know if they stopped because they just changed their mind, or they were just joking and they weren't going to do anything, or if because I was getting so close to the street, they knew they wouldn't be able to, there'd be witnesses. But that was really scary, and that was because of my race. That was because I was white. I was targeted by a bunch of people of another race because of my skin colour. And that had never happened to me before, and that was really scary. And if that happens to you all the time, because you live in a white society and you're a person of colour, that's horrific. It shouldn't happen. But doing it back to the people that have done it to you doesn't make it any less bad, and it shouldn't be happening. And it shouldn't be denied. And I just wanted to say that.